Rabbi Bowman and I designed the evening with Mr. Dees' permission. By the way, you may be seated. Did you know he's an ordained Baptist minister too, but he doesn't talk about that. Those who have to leave may leave, but we wanted to allow you the chance to offer some back and forth. So any questions, please?
Well,
Morris is willing.
thank you. I'm not, speaking for or against any religious group, but, they say, you have to be saved a bit to be a Baptist. I tell you who saved me was the Unitarians. Because the Baptists, they didn't like the fact that I tried to take up a collection in 1963 at my little church when I was the superintendent of the thing for the church that got bombed in Birmingham. And I said, today let's take up a collection for another Baptist church that suffered some damage. And they said, good idea. And then I said, I'm talking about last Sunday when the church was bombed in Birmingham. And one lady standing in the back, she was a missionary. And I think she went to Africa to, give education to the Africans, all that kind of stuff. And she stood up, and my daddy's name is the same as mine, so you'll have to understand what she said. She said, Little Morris, that ain't none of our business. Let's stay out of that business. And so I kind of left that, and I didn't go back. But, but there's some good folks there, I promise you.
Please.
Yes, ma'am. Did you stand up? Because I don't hear too good.
Amazingly, I was in Kima, Texas, when these things were going on.
Wow.
And I was working on a student film about everything when the plan came in. And I remember a young man, and I have wondered all these years whatever happened. A young man who was at the time thrown out of school in New Jersey for joining the Klan. I interviewed this young man who was a reasonable, intelligent young man. He was 16 or 17 years old, and it was all I could do to keep from saying to him, you're throwing your life away. Because it was being, national news that this young man was thrown out of school and joined the Klan. And do you have any idea what happened to him?
Well, what she said was she was down in Kima, Texas, but this guy was from New Jersey, you say?
Yes.
Oh, not New Jersey, Texas. Okay. Okay, just curious. I'm getting my geography straight here. I'm not sure what happened to him, but there hadn't been a single case that we've ever won against the Aryan nations in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, or you name the groups around the country, that we didn't have guys just like this who turned evidence against the group and testified for us. So, I think that there's hope for everybody, and I actually really think it's not a good idea to get in people's faces if they don't agree with you. It's better to talk with them and reason with them like you probably would have there, and try to let them understand that, that we're all part of the same, tapestry of life, so to speak. Well, thank you for your question.
Mr. I was wondering if you might share with the congregation about the Overland Park, the JCC shooting, and what's going on with that.
Well, let me see if there's another question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, just stand up. Yes, sir.
What about all those children at the border trying to get into America, like Guatemala?
Right. Well, that's the troubling thing, and that is that in Guatemala and El Salvador, I guess, people turn their children loose to get in this country and to get over here. Well, the way the law is set up, and this wasn't something passed in any Democratic administration, it was passed by Congress. When somebody comes to America and claims asylum, then there's a legal process you're supposed to go through. And that process is one that takes the time. And most of these people won't get asylum, they'll be sent back. But it's troubling to people to see this flow of people, and they've been pretty well stopped now. The place for them to work on that is back home because they think I'll get killed if I'm in the streets. And people could argue that in Chicago we have the same situation. They maybe like to leave Chicago and come to Memphis, and take up residency here. So it's a troubling issue, and people who see that as, a crass taking advantage of our system, because I would assume that there are millions of those young people who'd like to come to America. And we're not talking about open borders. We're talking about responsible immigration, and that's somebody taking advantage of a system that was set up to do good things for people truly seeking asylum. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Well, well, thank you for thank you for the work you do. The question was that she's an immigration attorney and has just gotten back from a place where women and children are locked up in sometimes not always the best conditions, separated from their families and trying to have a hearing. The Southern Poverty Law Center has an immigrant justice project, you might know, and we're working with other groups. In fact, several of our lawyers recently met in ways to try to streamline this program so that people can get out of these detention centers quicker. But it's based in Atlanta, our immigration project, and I'm sure they'd like to hear from you. Yes, yes, sir. Certainly. The question was, what are the priorities at Southern Poverty Law Center? With this concept that the March for Justice continues, clearly some of the things we did years ago are not as needed today. We have several projects. One is a LBGT project, and there are a lot of organizations working on these issues around the country. We're uniquely concerned with the South and the bias and prejudice that is involved there. I mean, there are these right to marry laws that states have gotten blocked, and we filed one of those suits too, the sanctity of marriage laws. But we have a new project. It's kind of, I guess it's called the Economic Justice Project. We just filed a suit in working with one of your groups here in Tennessee, where your state is not responding to people who make Medicaid applications. And a federal judge just issued a very significant order. Somebody here knows about that. Mentioned, the judge issued a very significant order. We're working with one of your groups here. We're working, in addition to our Immigrant Justice Project, which is a big project, we have a project that basically, for no other name, we call it the Schoolhouse to Jailhouse Pipeline Project, trying to stop this whole issue of schools' failure to educate kids with emotional and mental health problems, as well as the juvenile justice system, it's been turned pretty much over to private prisons warehousing young people. And when kids get kicked out of school for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the chances of them graduating is nil, and then the chance of them getting into the adult prison system is great. So that's one of the projects we have now. We have another project trying to deal with, I don't know about this state, but in our state and across the South, we have these title loan companies and payday loan companies that are just gouging poor people, just gouging them out for enormous interest rates. And we call that our Economic Justice Project. We have a bunch of bright young lawyers working on it. Jailing people for failure to pay traffic fines. There's a company going around trying to help cities collect fines, and they get around the, black letter Supreme Court law saying you can't do that. So that's one of our projects. And I'm still, the area that I've worked in the most is tracking and suing hate groups. Fortunately, we when I say there's 1,500 hate groups, they're not 1,500 United Klans of America that the members blew up the church in Birmingham. We put that one out of business. The Aryan Nations doesn't exist, and they did horrible things. We put the big hate groups out of business. What you have now is all kind of little splinter groups. Some of them are not neo-Nazi or Klan groups. They're like sovereign citizens. Over here in West Memphis, y'all probably know, there's a horrible story where the police chief's son stopped a car. He didn't know what it was, and it had a weird tag like citizen of the world. And they stopped these people, not knowing they were sovereign citizens. That's a group, it's a hate group that doesn't believe that this government has any control over their lives. And so when these two officers came to this car, a young man jumped in and shot them both with an AK-47 and killed them there, and they caught him quickly thereafter. And we did a roll call video that's been used in over 150,000 times, and maybe more than that on the internet, several 100,000 times, to teach police officers what the sovereign citizen is all about. They've killed like 15 or 20 police officers. They just gun them down. So that kind of group is what you have today, and some of your really fanatical groups. Yes, sir. About the what parties? Sure. Well, there are all stratas of this whole issue. When the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, states the Republicans control, and I'm not disparaging anybody's political beliefs, but some Republicans in southeastern states immediately passed laws curtailing the ease in which people who probably aren't their persuasion vote. I mean, like shortening the number of registration days, requiring some identification for older people who may or may not have it. In Pennsylvania, they passed one of those laws, and the federal court held it unconstitutional because the federal court asked the defendants, well, show me one case of voter fraud in Pennsylvania. They couldn't even come up with one. But when you say, sanctity of the election, we're going to stop fraud, that sounds really good, but you really don't have voter fraud. And I think that, sure, that's something that we're not working on, because that's not an issue we deal with. The ACLU and a lot of other groups are working on that issue. This whole voting thing is something that we really ought to give some thought to. Every single day, we transfer trillions of dollars through the internet, through banking systems, through financial things. Why can't people vote through the internet? Everybody's got one number, your Social Security number. And why isn't everybody registered when they're born? You got to have social, you're registered to vote when you're born, and when you get 18, you can exercise it. Voting wasn't made in America for the average common man. It was made for people who don't have a job from 8 to 5, and you think a guy nailing roofing is going to get out off a roof and go stand in line at the community center for 2 hours to vote? Not going to do that. Who's going to pay him? He needs every dime he can get. But if everybody had an opportunity to use that thing we carry around our pocket that we all got, they're so ambiguous that my law partner, Richie Cohen, the president of the Senate, was running around screaming the other day, "Where's my iPhone? I got to have my iPhone." Had it in his hand, But he really was. He had his secretary looking for his iPhone. And this is a fantastic computer, and you can vote right here for a period of 1 month before the election. But that's too simple. And if there's any voter fraud, whoever did it will get caught just about like that, because you got only one Social Security number, and if anybody votes it other than yourself, well then, you'll catch them pretty quick. So anyway, that's just, pie in the sky thinking. That's not going to happen right now. But by the year 2040, those in this country today who are minorities are going to be a majority. And between now and then, you're going to see some major changes in how things are done. And that's what's troubling and worrying a lot of the far-right political groups in this country. Got time for maybe one more question? Yes, sir. If I could give one piece, are you going to be a lawyer one day? Okay. What's your name? Hey, man. Okay, if I could give one piece of advice to lawyers in this country, and there are lots of lawyers doing lots of great things, and from writing your will to doing property transactions, but I think all the lawyers in this country take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and the Southern Poverty Law Center couldn't exist without the pro bono help of some of America's largest law firms, who don't park their conscience on the ground floor when they go up the elevator to their big offices. They're willing to do some work, and they can do it. I think I would ask lawyers in the country to remember why they went to law school, and remember, most of them, why they decided they want to help people. Along the way, things change. They get doing different things, but that I would say, think about why you went to law school, and see if you couldn't find some way to offer your services to the least among us. Now, this other story that he wanted me to tell. Yes, sir. Pardon me, I can't hear too well. Help children. Oh, yes, the Southern Poverty Law Center. We have several projects. One is a project called Teaching Acceptance and Tolerance. About 95,000 schools in America use that material. We give away about $8-9 million worth of free material annually. One of the films we did is called Bullied. We have an entire bullying program to try to educate. We aren't up to suing, groups for that, but we do have an educational program. But we did file a lawsuit against the Winoka Hennepin School District. That's the largest school district in Minnesota. It happens to be Michelle Bachman's district. And in that district, 5 young people in that school system there, the high school system, had committed suicide because of bullying because they were gay or perceived to be gay. We filed a lawsuit against that school system with the help of a Minneapolis law firm, and ended up with a terrific settlement that changed the culture of the whole school. The school basically said, just hands off, we're not going to do this, boys will be boys, blah, blah, and it's horrible things were happening. About 12 or 15 young people came forward, were plaintiffs in our lawsuit, and it was a beautiful undertaking, and all of them they've been bullied, $30,000 or $40,000 in damages, and that really got the school system's attention. And then they came in, we brought monitors in, and they began to teach the teachers how to deal, because the teachers were some of the biggest bullies, were some of the teachers, because they were just the rest of us, and they didn't understand what was going on. Yes, Was that what now? Well, historically in a country where there have been people who were here under one condition or another, that they're taken advantage of by landlords, by maybe law enforcement, and certainly Latinos have been taken advantage of. We've seen that. Alabama passed a horrible draconian law that was aimed at running all Latinos out. We took it to court. U.S. Supreme Court ruled that that's a federal issue, not a state issue, and pretty much enjoined the whole law. South Carolina, Georgia, we did their cases too, and Arizona, as you know, started that down the road. But, states like this state and so many others, they're too smart to pass such a law because they know that these people are doing important work in the community in jobs that can't be filled otherwise if people don't want to do them. And we see this happening. When we're going to come up with a comprehensive immigration bill, I'm not sure. President Nixon did, and he made a path to citizenship of several million people, and that was not a problem. But as I say, this fear, it's all created, has caused so much divisions in our country. The Tea Party people and others are just not going to let it happen. I'm not sure when it'll happen. But those incidents, like we see those kinds of things from time to time, we don't represent those individuals on an individual basis because we don't have the staff to handle that. But there are a lot of immigrant justice lawyers around that we try to send them to. We do take some of them. Give you a quick example. Down in Gulfport, Mississippi, we took this case on. A undocumented woman who worked 6 days a week, 11 hours a day in a Chinese restaurant, never left the back of it. She was brought in through an underground employment kind of thing. She's from Mexico. She had to have a baby, so she was pregnant, so she had 2 kids back home. Those were the mother, and she's up here making money to send back. And so she went to the emergency room to have the baby. One day after that, the baby was given to a white couple because they said she couldn't speak adequate English to take care of the child. And that's the truth. That's the true story. So they sent people to her house, and they didn't find a baby crib and da-da-da. Well, she was going to get the baby back home to her mother, and, she was desperate. But it took us 11 months to get that child back to that mother. And we just collected her $100,000 from the state for damages. She's back in Oaxaca, Mexico, living now, and now we're suing Singing River Hospital for their part in this situation. So those situations are there, and I understand. But let me close out by saying that a tragic thing happened in Overland Park, Kansas, at a Jewish community center. You probably know Glenn Miller, who was a former neo-Nazi guy from North Carolina, drove up there on a Sunday morning. I think he's about 65 or 70 years old, a former Green Beret, and he shot and killed 3 people. They weren't Jews, but he went there to kill Jews. He didn't know the difference. That's why he did it. Well, this guy had a history with us. I was appointed a federal prosecutor, the only time I've ever been a prosecutor, because Glenn Miller, when he was in North Carolina, had something called the White Patriot Party, former Klan group. And he had 1,000 people in uniforms marching all over North Carolina with the idea that they were planning for the race war to come. This is back in 76 or 78, somewhere right in there. Anyway, so it was discovered that he and his people had stolen military explosives from Fort Bragg, and they were going to plant C4 plastic explosives under a bus filled with black children and blow them all up, and then there'd be a race war, and they'd be right there to protect the white folks' interests, okay? So anyway, so I prosecuted this man, and after it was over, he was out being sentenced. He was waiting for his sentencing hearing. He got convicted, and so he and 4 others took off and left, and they sent a written threat that they were going to kill the federal judge in that case, Judge Britt, and myself. Well, killing me is one thing, but when you say you're going to kill a federal judge, I know we got one of them here in the room tonight, that gets the FBI's attention. So they caught this fella. They caught him, and he and 5 other guys were hiding in a trailer park in Springfield, Missouri. They got him, caught him, and all that. And they had all kinds of weapons and machine guns and explosives and all that good stuff. And so this guy would get 25 years in prison for this. But the FBI talked to him, and he agreed to testify against some other top neo-Nazi and Klan leaders around the country in a big trial that was held in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And so they cut him some slack, gave him a 5-year sentence, and ironically, in that trial he testified in, not a single one was convicted. So, you know, he served 5 years in the witness protection program. Actually, only served 3. And so he's been out. He's persona non grata to the neo-Nazi white community, racist community. But so he, in his anger, in his bitterness, he decided that he would go out in a blaze of glory. So thank goodness, it's so sad for those families and what they lost there. A tragic thing that happened there. And on the other hand, thank goodness he wasn't near Montgomery, because I think we'd probably be on his list. But thank y'all for having me here. I feel like I'm at home.
Thank you so
here.
much.
Thank you.